So, good morning, everyone. Welcome to lecture 7 of Grid and Cloud Computing. So, in this lecture, we'll continue our discussion on performance, security, and energy efficiency. Last two class, I told you about the performance factor, various performance metrics in order to evaluate the distributed system or cloud system. Today, we more focus on the security aspect as well as the energy efficiency. So, security is, you know that if you have studied the security subject, you know about the symmetric key cryptography, asymmetric key cryptography. In symmetric key cryptography, if you see, okay, in symmetric key cryptography, both sender, okay, and receiver uses the same key to encrypt as well as the decrypt the message, right? For example, sender want to send a data to the receiver. Sender will use a particular key. That key is used to convert the plain text to the original message, right? In order to convert the plain text to the ciphertext, the sender will use a key to convert the plain text into ciphertext before sending the message to a transmission medium, right? So here we will use a one key. So once the ciphertext is received by the receiver do the reverse process. It will use the same key to convert the ciphertext to again the plain text. Just like two students are sharing the same room, they have a lock and the lock is having two different keys. If one body lock a room, another person can use his or key to unlock the room, right? So that is one type of cryptography. So you know about DES algorithm, maybe data encryption and standard algorithm, or advanced encryption standard algorithm. These are the very popular algorithm in the case of symmetric key cryptography, right? Coming to the asymmetric cryptography, in asymmetric cryptography, what happened? The sender and receiver is not using a single key, right? Like in the previous case, the same key is used by the sender as well as the receiver. Okay, but in asymmetric cryptography, what happened? There is two key. One is public key, okay, public key. Another is called as a private, right? Just like if you concentrate on our email system, in the system you have a username, okay, another you have a password. So username is your public, right? Anybody can ask you the username, or anybody can give you the username. Suppose I want to contact you, I'll ask your class representative to give you a username, right? So that I'll send a mail to you. Okay, so sender require the username of the receiver. That is we call it a public key. So by using the public key of the receiver, I can encrypt my message, or I can convert my plain text to the ciphertext, right? Similarly, if you see the reverse side, once the email is received by you, or once the email is there in your email box, how you can view your email? By using your own private key. Your own private key you have to use. Okay. In order to log in the system, you require your public key as well as your private key. But by using your private key, you can decrypt the message. Here we are using a pair of public key and the private key in order to do data transmission. Okay, or in order to send any kind of data. So if you see in this case, with respect to the distributed system, or you go for cloud system or grid system, all are connected to the network. That could be local area network, or it may be your SAN, or it may be NAS, right? Whatever network you are using, it is potential to this network may face some kind of threat from some unauthorized people, or there is some intruder is there, or there is some attacker is there who want to who want to apply some kind of attack to a particular network. That we call as a network threat, right? So why it is there? It is applying the threat to a particular system. Later it will propagate to the entire network, so that the entire network will be under that particular hacker, right? So if you see, there are many cases nowadays we are listening in news also, right? Some attacker is attacking a particular system. The service is down for 24 hours, something like that, right? So this network virus, they can inject to a particular system, and this virus will propagate in a period of time, so that it will lead to a warm epidemic. So you know that this word epidemic is used in this stage of corona. Also, we use the word as epidemic. Now we use the word as pandemic. Epidemic means it is pointing to a particular location or a particular country, but pandemic indicates that it will be for the world. It will spread to whole over the world. Same word we can use here also, right? If a network virus leads to if a virus is attached to a particular network, if the entire network is down, if the entire network of a particular country or a particular location is down for a subsequent period of time, then we can say it is an epidemic. But if it is slow down the entire network of the whole over the world, then you can call it a pandemic, which will lose your billion of dollars, because many transactions is going on. So all the transaction will be not done, right? Or this will be encrypted by injecting some kind of virus or worms. At the same time, whatever confidential information you have in your computer system, that will be leaked. Okay, if some unauthorized person is accessing your computer system, there may be a chance that there is some confidential data with you. That confidential data may be leaked. So that is called as your information leak, which lead to your loss of confidentiality. Like question paper is a confidential one. Before examination, if it is leaked, that we can say that information is leaked. So that paper is no more a valid paper, right? In many examination also in past days, right? You may have heard about this news, right? Information is the question paper was leaked prior to the examination. So that is called the loss of confidentiality. And you know, in security there are many policies are there. For example, confidentiality is an important factor. Similarly, integrity is another factor. Access control is another factor. Authentication and authorization is another factor. So if you compromise these parameters or these policies, let's say you have compromised confidentiality. So with respect to that, a lot of attacks are there. If you have compromised integrity, with respect to that, a lot of factors are there. With respect to authentication authorization, there is a lot of attacks are there. So that I will show you in the next slide. So if integrity is lost, right, or integrity is compromised, then what will happen? User alteration, or you can inject virus like Trojan virus, Trojan horse virus, or service spoofing attack. The service will be spoofed. Okay, the genuine user will not able to access the system. Unauthorized user will control the entire system. And one of the very famous attack is called as first. Initially, it is called as denial of service attack. That is, it is attack to a single system. From a single system, we are initiating the process. But later point of time, the same thing can be done by multiple systems. Right? In a network, if 30 systems are there, I am attacking from only one system in order to slow the service. That is called as our denial of service. For example, what you can do, you can create a virus. Inside that virus, you have a for loop, right? You have written some code, right? You have written a for loop. In that for loop, the for loop you will iterate for, let's say, some 1 lakh of time, right? You have given the limit as 1 lakh. In each loop, what it will do, it will create a new tab. Okay, in a web browser, it will create a new tab. Then it will search google.com. Okay, so you know that within a fraction of a second, continue this particular loop. This loop will iterate for 1 lakh time. So 1 lakh number of tabs will be open, and each and every tab is accessing google.com. So that the services provided by google.com is slower. Why you are doing so? If in a single system, if you are doing, in the rest of the system, if 29 users are there, if they want to access the google.com, the process becomes slower. So the services will not be given to the rest 29 users. That is, whenever they are accessing, they will get a denial message. The service is down, or there is a downtime is going on, something like that. That's why many security policies are enforced by Google so that such cases can be avoided. But many cases, denial of service case happens. So it is the loss of the system operations and internet connections. Also, whatever bandwidth you have, entire bandwidth you are sharing. Okay, the bandwidth is there. Okay, the entire bandwidth is consumed by a single system, so other system may not get chance to get the services. So that is one of the problems. Similarly, loss of authentication and authorization. Authentication means you are giving, with respect to a particular user, you are giving a username and password. Once the username password will be checked, cross-checked and confirmed, then only you can consider as a genuine user and you will enter the system. Okay, that is your authentication. Authorization means you are delegating your power to somebody else. For example, you will share your username password with another person. That person will use the username password to enter the system as a genuine user. That people are doing. Like one person may have a Netflix account, or you can say Amazon Prime account. In order to watch the movie, what we are doing, we are sharing our username password with our friends. So they can also view the movie, we can also view the movie. So that is called as authorization. But sometimes, if in your trust you are giving to your friends, okay, but that will also lead to some kind of attack. That's why it is saying attackers illegitimate use of the computing resources. The resources is used illegally. Okay, if there is no potential policies are there, then what will happen? Two user accessing the same account. Okay. Similarly, if you see many if you have your IEEE account, you know IEEE is a very reputed society. In IEEE, if you want to log into a particular system, let's say in Hyderabad, okay, let's say 10 a.m., right? Then at 10 to you have logged in the system, the IEEE email ID from Delhi. Okay, 10 a.m. you have access to IEEE your email ID from Hyderabad, and 10 to you have shared your password with your friend who is there at New Delhi, and he is going to access your IEEE account. Then what will happen? It is not possible that within 2 minutes, a person who is using the email ID from Hyderabad, he will use the email ID in another position, another location, let's say in New Delhi. What happened? Your account will be temporarily suspended due to the reason because multiple users are accessing. We are assuming that there is an attack, and that is illegal also. You cannot share your password with others. Confidentiality is violated. So such type of policies are few providers are enforcing so that attacks or the threats or the worms, whichever is injected by the unauthorized person or hacker, can be minimized. So here I told you there are three important factors. One is confidentiality, integrity, and availability. Most important is your availability. Availability of the system will be down, or the system having more downtime if there is an attack, or if you cannot expect the load of the system. Okay, and what is your expectation? And but what is the reality? If there is a huge gap, then the availability will be compromised. Okay, so whenever we are applying any policies, you have to ensure that it should not compromise the computational power of the resources. Unnecessary security enforcement, if you apply to the resources or to the user, Okay, then what will happen? It will delay the execution of any kind of application. So security cannot be violate, or you can say cannot be dominate the computational power of the resources or computational resources required to a particular user. Right? I am not saying security should not be there. Security should be there, but it should not be in that manner which will compromise your computational power. Suppose one work required 2 minutes of time. After applying security policies, it is taking 2 minutes 30 seconds or 2 minutes 10 seconds. Then it is okay. But after applying the security policy, if it is taking 5 minutes, then that is not fair. Right? That you have to ensure. So you can see in this particular slide, if you compromise confidentiality or you compromise your integrity, availability, or authentication, then what kind of attacks are possible? That is written in this particular slide. What kind of system attacks or network threats are possible if you are going to violate a particular security requirement? Let it be confidentiality or integrity or availability or authentication, or it may be other things also. You cannot say that one type of attack is only possible in the confidentiality. Sometimes one attack is dependent on confidentiality as well as your integrity. Right? You can see a lot of attacks are there. So as you may have a subject of security, so otherwise you can go through these type of these various types of threats or attacks, and we explore these types of attacks. Okay. So as the time constraints is there, so I'll not go in details of each and every attacks. So please explore it. If anything you are finding, then you share with me so that we will discuss in the class. So one of the primary attack is a DOS attack, denial of service attack, which can be generalized to multiple systems, which can be applied in various systems. So we call it a very famous attack that is called as distributed denials of service attack, which we call as DDoS. Okay, DDoS attack is a very much attack. So many researchers also focusing on DDoS because in distributed system, attack is not done in a single point. Attack will be done in the multiple point in order to slow the entire network. The type of network threats and data integrity, that is with respect to the copyright protection. Copyright protection. You know that whenever we are installing the Windows system, it is showing that the copyright protected by Windows. But you see how many people are using the genuine version of Windows. Many people are using the pirated version. Most of the software, whatever we are using, if it is not a institute-based subscription, for example, institute is providing a lot of software that is a genuine software, right? That is purchased by our institute and it will be used by the staff, faculty, and students of NIT. But many cases, whatever software we are using in our laptop, that is having a pirated version. Okay, that we call as a collusive piracy. What kind of things it is? For example, you have purchased a quick kill antivirus, right? And that antivirus you have purchased from, let's say, Flipkart or Amazon, and you have paid some amount for 3 years or 2 years or 1 year. Okay. Once you receive the CD and install in your system, what I will do? Or you have shared your CD with another friend, right? That friend also installed installed in its system. But the number of users restricted for that particular antivirus is only one, right? So there are many scenarios happen here. Second, if there is no such restriction, two people can use the same antivirus. Second one, assume that the genuine user is having some issue in his computer system. He wants to format the system. At the same time, the second user who is accessing the antivirus, he will be treated as a genuine user. While the genuine user will use the antivirus, and at the same time there is a restriction is enforced, so it will say that no, already someone is using this antivirus, you are not the genuine user. So what we are doing here, the paid client who originally purchased the antivirus, which we call as a colluders, illegally share the copyright content files with unpaid clients, which is the pirates. We are sharing, we are original user, we are sharing with our friends. Okay, they are the pirates, we are the collectors. Okay, so in order to detect such system, many security policies are enforced by various software vendors so that they can detect the pirates, or they will simply display one message. Already this person, this virus or this particular software, antivirus or this particular software is used by a particular person, and as the limitation is one, you are not eligible. You purchase this system, right? So that is called as your identity-based signature you can use, or you can use timestamp tokens. Nowadays, also in our real life, we are having the fingerprint system, right? So give your fingerprint, any system will know that you are a genuine user. Your Aadhaar card is also linked with the system, so your identity is verified, which indicates that you are genuine user. You can access to the system. Recently, also SBI has changed its policies. If you want to withdraw more than 10,000 rupees per day, then one SMS OTP will come to your mobile phone. You have to enter the OTP in order to withdraw the cash from ATM. Okay, or in the later point of time, or in the after few years, there is a ATM machines will be attached with your fingerprint. So once you give the fingerprint, then your identity will be verified. Accordingly, the case will be withdrawn. Right? So that if you are giving your cards to your friend in order to withdraw the money, that thing will not be possible. So many policies are there. Each and every policy is having loopholes which the hackers or unauthorized persons are focusing, and they are uh, trying to cover all the your entire network so that the service will be slower, right? So if you go for the system defense technologies, so system defense technology is having three generations. Earlier, people try to prevent or avoid intrusions. So we are installing antivirus, or we have a strong firewall system, right? In which we can prevent the system or we can avoid the system. Firewall is coming in later, but similar to firewall system, we have something. Or we are changing our password repeatedly. Many websites also saying after 6 months you are forced to change your password, right? So this preventing or evading intrusion is possible by issuing a particular token or by applying some cryptography system. At that time, security is not that much mature in the first generation of network defense system. In the second system, what we are doing, we are detecting the intrusion. In order to detecting the intrusion, there is a intrusion detection system. That is a very important area of security and privacy, IDS, which we call as IDS, intrusion detection system. IDS is able to detect the intrusion and mitigate the intrusion and take some. Or we can use the very popular firewall in the second generation, or you can use the public key infrastructure, PKI. Third type of system is that we are not only detecting the intrusion, we are taking some steps against the intrusion. That is called as intelligent response to intrusion. If somebody want to hack your data, you are not only preventing that, and you are also doing some harm to that system, or you are also doing something which makes impossible to the intruder to get a new connection or get your data. So that is your third generation of network defense system. So a lot of developments are happens with respect to various generation. We have now having a lot of having a good security system in comparison to the previous one, right? Like today, if you see the key size is very high. Earlier, the key size is very low. If key size is 2, you know that total number of possibilities is only 2 to the power 2. If it is a binary system, okay, and it is very small. So later people have used 64-bit system, 128-bit system, 256, 512-bit. If you increase it is fine. You will get a good security mechanism. But at the same time, you have to see that services should be provided to the users in a timely manner. Okay. So security should not be that much so that it will, what it will do, it will compromise the computational time, okay, or it will increase the computational time, which leads to customer dissatisfaction, right? Similarly, if you come to the cloud computing, you know that various services are provided by cloud. One is your infrastructure as a service, platform as a service, software as a service. Many cloud service provider is providing IaaS, PaaS, and SaaS. You can search these things. Similarly, location perspective, I told you there is a private cloud, there is a public cloud, there is a community cloud, or managed cloud, or the last one is combination of any two, that is called your hybrid cloud. So, who is responsible for which part? You can say that there are three layers. One is infrastructure, next is platform. In the top layer is called the software as a service layer, right? So you can say infrastructure is a hardware layer. Always the bottom layer is a hardware layer. Top layer is more towards the software layer. That we have studied from the OSI ISO reference model as well. The bottom layers are, most of the bottom layers are hardware layers, more towards the hardware layer. If it is not completely hardware, more towards the hardware layer. In the top part, we have software layer. And user is accessing to the software layer, not to the hardware layer. User is making the request from the software layer, then the request will propagate to the hardware layer and the service will be provided. So if you go for IaaS, infrastructure as a service, in infrastructure as a service, if you see this confidentiality, integrity, okay, will be taken care by user and provider respectively. So confidentiality should be maintained by the user, integrity should be provided by the provider in infrastructure as a service. So they are dividing their responsibility. Like you know that earlier we have a DOM network or DOM system, then we have a 2-tier system, 3-tier system, like that we have an entire system. So we are dividing the responsibilities so that there is no single point of failure or there is no single point. All are responsible for some work so that the system will work smoothly. Even a single person will facing failure, that will not affect the entire network. Similarly, if you go for platform as a service or a software as a service, where services, providers, and users, they are responsible for the integrity and confidentiality. So as a user, you are responsible for your data integrity and confidentiality. As a provider also, they are also responsible for data integrity and confidentiality. So there is no division. Both responsibility is given to the user as well as the provider or service provider. Okay. So based upon that, okay, various security policies are enforced with respect to various layers of cloud computing, right? I'll tell you later various architecture. In that architecture also you will see in each and every layer we have various security policies in order to ensure that an unauthorized person should not use our resources so that our resources can be misutilized. We have to avoid it, right? Okay. The last part of the system of today's discussion, that is called as your energy efficiency. Earlier, people are focusing on one term, that is how we are going to utilize the system. Okay, how we are going to utilize our system, that is called as your utilization. People are focusing on the resource utilization. Whatever resources are available in cloud or grid or in the distributed system, the resource utilization should be as maximum as possible. Like in your computer system also, if you press Control Alt Delete, you can see the performance of the processors, or you can see how much your memory you are using in your system. Okay, if you see that system, that is less than 50% only. But I will tell you, if you install a particular software, it is above 90%. So people are more focusing on the resource utilization without going to the second factor. The second factor is about energy. Nobody focus on the energy. Earlier people have interested in the resource utilization only. Many researchers suggested that if resource utilization will increase, especially after 70%, then the amount of carbon dioxide, heat, emissions generated in comparison to the less than 70%, if you compare these two, that is very high, or that is drastically increased. So if carbon dioxide will increase or heat will increase, what will happen? It will directly impact to our environment. Okay. So today we people are talking about the green environment. Everywhere we are using this word green environment or smart environment, right? So in the smart environment, what we are saying, energy should be a primary factor. You do whatever you want to do, but our environment should not be spoiled. So their energy efficiency plays an important role. I am not saying resource utilization will decrease so that energy efficiency will be there. You have to make this trade-off, right? You have to maintain this trade-off so that both can be balanced. Just like our concept, whatever we have studied in algorithm paper, that is called as time-space trade-off. Time complexity also need to be minimized, space complexity also need to be minimized, but there is a trade-off. You have to balance these two parameters. So you can see here, energy consumption issues in the server or HPC system. So we have to ensure that whatever servers or HPC systems we are using, that we are properly utilizing, okay, and it should not consume more energy or it should not require more power. Whenever we are executing something, we are calling it energy, but prior to that we are saying power. The power consumption by each and every server and HPC system should be properly utilized, right? So for which there is a management policy which we call as distributed power management policy. I'll come to this policy later. So there is a Earth simulator. So I told you in grid computing, there are a lot of scientific projects are there, scientific engineering projects are there. One of the simulator name is called as your Earth simulator. Earth simulator requires 12 megawatts of peak power. Assume that 12 megawatts of power is required to run that particular simulator or do some kind of simulation or experimentation in that simulator. At the same time, if you see the petaflop is another type of simulator where we require 100 megawatt of peak power. These are some statistics. You need not worry about these statistics, but just to tell you why energy efficiency is required. So if you assume that per megawatt the price is $100, what you can say in this case, Earth simulator require $1200 per hour, petaflops required 100 into $100, that is $10,000 per hour. Okay, imagine how much price you are going to pay per hour. And these simulators are a very big simulator. I am not saying this is a simple simulator. Okay, the people are ready to pay $10,000 or $1,200. Okay, but this much energy cost we are going to pay. So at the same time, we have to say, if we are paying such cost, so we have to ensure that we are utilizing our resource properly, okay, or the energy whatever required to run the particular application, that should be fruitful. Otherwise, there is no use, or we are unnecessarily wasting the money, right? So see here, energy consumption of if you see a unused server. So many analysis suggested that our personal computers, whatever available in whole world, the utilization rate is only 5 to 10%. In the server case, it is 30 to 35%. So it directly it implies that 90% of the personal computer or 60 to 70% of the servers are not utilized properly. That we are saying unused server. So here it is saying 15% of the full servers in a company left powered on without being actively used. Like you are not sure that how much servers is required for a particular application. So if it is target is 75, in order to be in the safe side, you are saying let us make it 90 servers. 75 servers will be online and 15 servers will be active, but they are not used because you do not know how to estimate how many servers are required. Okay. Similarly, if you see total 44 million servers in the world, 4.7 million servers are not doing any work. they are in the standby mode, or you can say they are active but they are not executing any work. So if we design a particular policy where we can save these 4.7 million servers power or while executing we call it the energy, then we can say the system, the energy efficient system can be designed. So we have to design a particular policies in order to make these servers in a switch off mode or in the sleep mode. Okay. So whenever there is a requirement, we will again switch on the servers or we will wake up the servers so that it will meet the requirement of the customers. So if you turn off these servers, they are saying $3.8 billion of energy cost, for the total cost, including the server cost, that is $24.7 billion total cost we can save. Okay. Similarly, the statistics also says if you see 11.8 million tons of carbon dioxide per year generated, so that is coming from these servers which are not doing any work, which is same as the consumption of 2.1 million car. Whatever fuel consumed by 2.1 million car, that is same as the carbon dioxide generated by the data center. That's why we are heading towards the green data center or green energy, right? Or you can say renewable energy people are using. Similarly, in the US, they are citing 3.1 is generated, which is 5,80,678 cars. So our objective is to find such a new server and make them in a sleep mode, okay, or in the switch off mode based upon the requirement, so that energy will be also saved. By as a cost is also associated with energy, so we can say energy cost also can be minimized. The next one is there is a power management issues in the distributed computing platform is divided into 4 layers. You can see there are 4 layers. Again, I told you in this also, in previously also, the bottom layer is your hardware layer. You can see in this case, the bottom layer is called as your network layer, which is having your router, switch, copper, fiber optic. Top of the network layer, you have resource layer, you have server, PCs, laptop, desktops, or you can say workstations or servers, or you can totally you can say the data centers or supercomputers also. In top of the resource layer, you have a middleware layer, and middleware layer is going to provide you an abstraction. So middleware layer is more responsible in comparison to other layers. And on top of the middleware layer, you have a software layer where user is initiating his request, that we call as an application layer. It may be a DNA related application, it may be a earthquake application, it may be biology application, it may be physics application, it may be a weather forecasting application, it may be a medical application, any kind of application you can have. Because we require massive amount of computational power. See here, application layer, any kind of scientific application, engineering application, business application, financial application, where there is a requirement of maximum power, maximum computational power, you can go for this system, resource management system, right? Because we cannot purchase that much computer system. It is not possible to purchase billion computers by a single organization. That's why we are relying on the cloud as grid. So while you are executing any kind of application, I told you repeatedly, 2 important factors: performance, energy consumption. So both are need to be balanced. Performance will be higher if the utilization is more than 95%. But at the same time, you have to ask the question, what about energy consumption? If energy is drastically increased, okay, then it is better to switch on another server, migrate few loads of the first server which is busy for 95%, which is utilizing 95%. So we will migrate some load from the first server to another server in order to make the system as an energy efficient one. That's why it is saying it is focusing on the performance versus the energy consumption. So where performance is relying on how much instructions or what is the throughput of the system, how many transactions you are doing, how many instructions you are executing, in what is the processor size, how efficiently you can execute in a short period of time, how you can execute a particular applications. So they are relying on the completion time. Completion time depends upon which one? How much instructions you want to execute in a particular processor, and it also depends on the processor size, MIPS, how much million instructions can be executed by a particular processor. So there is two important factors, that is the computation and that is the storage, which will determine how much time is required to complete a particular work in a particular system. Second layer is called as your middleware layer. And you know that middleware layer is an intermediate layer between the top layer is your application layer, and next to the middleware layer you have resource layer, and it is responsible for many things, any type of management issues, any type of fault tolerance issues will be done by the middleware layer. Or I told you a word, if you remember, single system image is responsible of this middleware layer. So it also provides the resource broker. Why we need resource broker? Resource broker is an intermediate person or intermediate software unit in which it maps which application need to map to which particular resources. One side you have a set of resource, another side you have a set of clients or user, you have to map. That is called as your matchmaking process, will be done by the resource broker. Apart from that, communication service, task analyzer, task scheduler, security assess, reliability control, information service capability is the responsibility of the middleware layer. Once you assign a particular application to a particular resource, you have to monitor whether it is smoothly executing or not, whether the resource is active or not, whether the resource is going to complete the task in a particular time, that you have to analyze. That is the responsibility of the middleware layer. So here the scheduling come into picture because the number of resource, if you see the number of users are more, means number of tasks are more, and the number of resources is very small. Okay, when you have 5 people, okay, and number of food packet is 5. 5 different persons are there, you have 5 food packet. There is no need of scheduling, right? You can assign 1 food packet to each individual person. But when there is a 5 food packet, okay, but you have 10 people, then you have to decide who is hungry, who is not hungry. Okay, that's why task scheduling come into picture if the number of resources is less in comparison to the number of tasks. What is our overall objective? The objective is to minimize the max spend. Max spend means the total amount of time required to complete a set of tasks is called as our max spend. So we have to ensure that the make essence should be as minimum as possible so that all the tasks will be completed before their deadline. So here also many people related, they designed a cost function. The cost function will determine the relationship between the make spend and energy consumption. If the make spend is very huge, the energy consumption will be also more, because more time you have to switch on the server, or more time the server need to execute the work. So you have to compensate this too also. The next layer is resource layer, where you have a set of computational nodes as well as a storage. Because many applications require computation, many applications require storage also. Or they need a storage and they have some pre-specified time. On that time only it will execute in a computational node. Right? So here we are using a policy, as I mentioned in previously also, dynamic power management, DPM policy. What this policy says, idle mode to one or more low power mode. Idle mode means a computer system is completely idle. Just like I have my smartphone, I have fully charged it, my mobile data is off, I am not using my mobile phone, I am keeping my mobile phone in a particular place. Just I want to see that after 7 days or after 30 days whether the battery will be there or not. Battery is 100% or not. The battery will never be 100%, right? Because the system is idle, but still it is consuming some power. So after 30 days or 7 days, it may happen that your smartphone is completely, the battery is 0%. So here it is saying, why not convert this idle mode to the some low power mode? Let it be, there is a classification. One low power mode is somebody will be active to receive particular application. Another low power mode, somebody will wake up to receive an application. Another low power mode is a particular system is completely switched off. Such types of mode we can design by using this DPL. And one very popular policy is used here, that is called as your DBFS policy. You can ask your electrical students, friends, right? That what is the meaning of DBFS? So DBFS policy is used in data centers in order to estimate this is a power management policy. That is called as a dynamic voltage frequency scaling. So in order to save the energy, what we are doing, we are concentrating on the power consumption of the CMOS circuit. Okay, the circuit whatever you are using is in a processor. So it has a direct relationship with the frequency and the square of the voltage supply. The relationship between frequency and voltage you see here. So DPFS, what it is saying, if voltage will be increased, then what will happen? Energy consumption, the power required is also increased. So you should not increase the voltage. Better if somebody require 200 voltage. In the next slide, I will tell you. It is more clear in this particular slide. So see this example. Here you can see somebody require frequency of 200 megahertz, right? In the second, we have reduced it to 100 megahertz. But if you reduce to 100 megahertz, it is taking more time. But in the 200 megahertz, it is taking less time. So it is saying the right side saves energy in comparison to the left side. So that is the advantages you will do. So frequency should not be the maximum, which will create a problem. Increase your energy. Okay. So many people also establish relationship between the execution time and power consumption. Many people are there. If anybody want to do is finally put it in cloud. So I will share this purpose with you, right? So you have to change your frequency with respect to time in order to save the energy. That is done by your DBFS policy. The last layer is your network layer. Network layer, you know that in computer network also there are many protocols are there. AODB protocol is there. DSR protocols are there, which are responsible for routing. Routing is nothing but finding a path from a source to destination. How efficiently you can reach to the destination. That is nothing but transferring the packet from a particular source to the destination. You require routing. So there are two major challenges here. First one is how to represent the network. Okay, how to design a particular model in order to represent the network, where you can have interaction among the time, space, and energy. How much time it is required, how much storage is required, or what is the energy consumed by the resource unit. Another is that you can see that one particular node is drastically increasing the energy. So it may happen that that particular node is attacked by a unauthorized person or a hacker. So you have to design some energy efficient protocol which is against the network attack. Okay. So we do not require a routing policy. Here we require some energy efficient routing algorithms which will deal with these parameters. System. So DS method enables the exploitation of the slack time. Slack time is nothing but idle time. It is focusing on idle time. If idle time is there, it will reduce the voltage. If it will reduce the voltage, the amount of energy required will be less, or energy wastage will be minimized. Okay. And it also focus on the inter. One task is going on, at the same time other tasks are also going on in some resources, and they need to interact with each other. So by looking every time we want to minimize the energy. So that we discuss that it want to it will execute the task in a lower voltage frequency so that the energy will be minimized. So they are using a particular formula here where you can establish the relationship between the energy and frequency. So energy is nothing but C efficient C efficient is nothing but you have studied something called circuit switching in computer network. So here we are using circuit switching capacity. F is nothing but your frequency, which is derived here. V is nothing but your voltage. T is nothing but the execution time of a particular task. And frequency is dependent on K. K is a technology dependent factor. With respect to the technology, we are monitoring this factor, right? Probably these values is in between 0 to 1. And we are calculating the voltage and threshold voltage. That is called as V minus Vt. This is your threshold voltage. Suppose I will tell you, once you exceed 200 voltage, then the energy consumption will drastically increase. That's why we are monitoring a threshold voltage. So by calculating this one, you can decide how much energy is consumed using DBFS policy. Apart from DBFS policy, a lot of policies are also there, but DBFS is one of the popular method used in distributed system. So it is saying reducing the voltage as well as the frequency, okay, leads to energy consumption can also be reduced. Okay, so reduce the frequency and voltage during the workload slack time. Idle time you have to reduce, right? For example, here you need a more voltage. Your work starts from here, but initially you have fixed the frequency as 200 megahertz. Okay, later point of time it is executing up to 3. After that you came to know that this much frequency is not required up to, let's say, up to 7. Okay, so in order to meet the workload, the system should be on, right? You cannot say that all the systems I put in switch off mode. Then in order to start a particular service also it will take time. That's why we reduce the energy up to 100, so it will be there up to 6. Then 7 it requires more energy, so it provide the more frequency at this time unit 7. Okay, in this way you can reduce the frequency in order to reduce the energy consumption.